Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
This is it. Welcome to MTV Music Television, the world's first 24-hour stereo video music channel. Now, just moments ago, all of the VJs and the crew here at MTV collectively hit our executive producer, Sue Steinberg, over the head with a bottle of champagne, and behold, a new concept is born. The best of TV combined with the best of radio. Now, starting right now, you'll never look at music the same way again. We'll be right back to introduce the other VJs and the other folks who are going to be with us on MTV.
I got you.
Awesome. Mark, how you doing, man?
We're holding on, hanging in.
Great to see you, Mark. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, sure. How are you doing? How's life down there?
I'm doing great. You know, it's starting to get humid. I'll tell you what, there's no cool Faena shows going on. I'll tell you that much.
I'm sure.
Well, Mark, very appreciative of your time.
Sure.
You know, normally you're the one doing the questions. The one of the best, one of the top 10, one of the GOATs. But, you know, for a little bit today, let me ask some of you.
Please.
That's all right. Awesome. So, you know, first of all, Mark, how have the past 2+ months been for you? You know, in New York and with your family, friends, how have they been for you?
Bizarre, I guess. that's how it's been. I'm happy that no one in my circle of friends and no one in my family, you know, my daughter or my sister, no one has gotten sick. So for that, that's fantastic. I'm happy about that. But it's been, you know, before the really hard lockdown began in New York, I was on the 80s cruise.
Oh my God.
Right. People thought I was insane. They were like, you're going? And we got back into Miami on the 17th of March.
Oh, wow. You pushed it.
Yeah, it was a 7-day cruise. And believe me, you know, on the 5th and the 4th of March, all of my friends and people at work were like, you're going on a cruise? What's the matter with you? It turned out to be fine. I didn't get sick, and none of the people that I was hanging out with, the artists, you know, Terry Nunn or Martha Davis, you know, all of these people, no one of the performers got sick. So it's been all right, all things considered.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, I want to get to Debatable and what you're currently doing now and all that stuff. But I'd like to start, you know, really quickly with some of your background. Of course,
Okay.
You know, how did you first fall in love with music, Mark? Because you started so young. You were, you know, music director at WMMR in Philly in 1978. But what was your first memories of falling in love with music?
It was in my family. I grew up with a hi-fi. My parents had a hi-fi back when that was furniture. And, you know, my parents were into jazz vocalists, you know, Sarah Vaughan, Dinah Washington. Sinatra, of course, was huge in our house. And that was the stuff that just was always on. You know, we had music on through dinner, and you know, on the weekends we would have, you know, our family come over to the house. We had a pool in our backyard when I was a kid, and there was always music. And I tried being a musician, and I realized that I'm too freaking lazy to be a musician. It was like, oh, I didn't want to play. I didn't want to learn to play the drums. I just wanted to play the drums.
Right. You just wanted the fun. Yeah.
Right.
I got you.
So, you know, once I realized that I was not destined to be a musician, and that was fairly early on, radio was kind of the next thing for me because I wanted to do something with music. I didn't know exactly what, but it seemed like, yeah, talking on the radio and turning people on to new music, that was something that I loved. So that was sort of the next logical step for me.
That's great. You know, well, obviously mission accomplished, and your focus started showing because the results started coming in early. In 1980, you moved to New York, right? You moved to New York, and you moved to classic rock station, the biggest one in New York. Wanted to talk to you about a historical night. I'm sure you've talked about this 100,000 times, but the night John Lennon was killed.
Oh man,
you were on the air, right?
I was.
How was that?
You know, in addition to what everyone around the world was feeling on that night, for me, it was more personal. I was literally living right next door to the Dakota. I mean, I could look out of my window of my apartment and I could see down into what I imagine would look like the white room in John Lennon's apartment in the Dakota. And it's, you know, I grew up with the Beatles, and the way that it went down for me was odd because it was Monday Night Football. It was Jim Morrison's birthday. And we, you know, for birthdays, we always did a block of songs from the artist. And I started to first get calls from listeners. Hey, did you hear something? You know, John Lennon was shot. Did you hear anything about that? I hadn't. It was Monday Night Football. Howard Cosell was covering the game, and he made mention on the air of some sort of a report. I ran around the corner to the AM station. I was working at PLJ, the FM station for ABC in New York. And I ran around the corner to WABC and talked to their guys. And as I was going to get the information, the story came across on the wire. Wow. And the guy, you know, said, you know, we don't really have any of the details yet. We just know that he was shot. And, you know, within 15 minutes, 20 minutes, we heard that he was dead. And that is definitely the second time ever on the air that I cried. I started to play Beatles music and John Lennon music, and, you know, I don't even remember what I said. Somebody actually sent me a tape of it years later that they had taped it off the radio. But to do that, and it was I started on the air at 10 p.m. and by 11:15 it had happened. And the news was out, and I was into, you know, doing this, playing the Beatles music and trying to come to terms and taking phone calls and all of that. And then I get off the air at 2 a.m. and I go home, and there's, you know, my street is 72nd Street is blocked off. There is a massive crowd in front of the Dakota. Wow. They're checking ID for people to get onto the block. But in that short amount of time, there was, I don't know, there had to be 500 people in front of the Dakota, just gathered in a crowd in front of these giant gates. There was flowers already, and there were people who were singing Beatles songs. And they happened to be, as I noted as I was heading into my apartment building, that they were listening to PLJ, the station that I was on. So I was hoping they were listening to me before I got there. Mm-hmm. And it was, you know, one of the saddest nights of my life. Sure. To be thrust into that, to actually have the fortune to be on the air when that happened. Oof. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just hearing you talk about it now, it has so much emotion. It obviously played such a big part in everyone's life, and you were like starring planetary role in that story. So wow.
Yeah, the universe just placed me there.
That could be a movie, by the way.
I guess so.
Just like, you know, the DJ. But yeah, thank you so much for that story, Mark. So I want to move on a little bit to MTV. Obviously, beautiful, new, fresh concept, changed the world. But, you know, it was also risky. It was unproven. In fact, I believe that you and your colleagues were told to, like, don't quit your day job kind of thing. Like, because we don't know how this is going to pan out. How did MTV approach you? Like, and what gut feeling did you know?
Didn't approach me.
Oh,
they didn't approach me.
There you go.
I was nobody. I was just, you know, I was a DJ on the rock station in New York.
So how was that?
But I heard about it from a friend of mine in Philadelphia, who was involved with a television station. I was going to do something in Philly on TV. In fact, I was going to host once a week an hour-long video music show that my radio station was going to simulcast. This is in '79.
Wow.
But this friend of mine called me and said, yeah, there's this company, it's Warner Music and American Express. And I don't know, they're doing some 24-hour video thing. You may want to check it out. So I called this guy that we both knew and got a meeting. And I went over to it was at the time the Sheraton Hotel on 7th Avenue. And it was like, kind of like, okay, I have a meeting with some guy in this random hotel room. And I literally, it was like, ooh, this is like auditioning for a porno movie or something. It was
Me
really
too. Me
weird.
too. Ahead of its time. Yeah.
So I went up and my friend was there, but it was like a regular hotel room. And he had moved one of the sort of the nightstands around to be like a desk. And I was one of the people who were coming in to sort of interview for the job. And from that, I got a couple of auditions, and the rest is rock history. I lucked out.
The rest is rock history, Mark, indeed. And, just a little bit more about MTV. That first day shooting, obviously, it's now legendary. Starting right now, you'll never look at music the same way again. Your quotes are embedded into music history. What was that first day like? Were you guys nervous? I know you mentioned Sue Steinberg hitting her with champagne.
Yeah. Who I'm still friends with. She changed my life. She was the executive producer at MTV when we launched August 1st. And by October 1st, she was gone. So it's weird, but we're still great friends today. The first day that everyone saw actually happened 2 days before. Everything was pre-recorded. So it was, the whole, and we had been sort of rehearsing and doing some interviews and things in advance. We were doing run-throughs for probably 6 weeks, 8 weeks before we launched. So I had I'd never done television before. So I sort of was starting to get a sense of it. And I look at those first hours of MTV and, me sort of kicking things off. And it's just like, I just look like a statue or something. I like caught in the headlights.
You think so? Because I was, every time I look at those tapes, I see something new. It's like a layered, like Steinbeck novel. Today, in the research, when I was watching it, I noticed your yoga poses. You were really like, you were on it with your posture and like crazy. Like, how
Jamie,
do you do
you got to be kidding me, dude. I have tried to do yoga. I can't do yoga. The thing is that it was a weird sort of concept. Here I am sitting on a set that's supposed to look like, I don't know what, like somebody's basement or a den. We didn't even know. And for the first few months, we were like, well, how are we online? There was no VJs before us. It's so sort of commonplace now to see young people doing interviews and talking about music and this kind of thing. That didn't really exist. So we literally were figuring out what a VJ was like. What did we do? How did we do it? So it was that kind of an experience of literally trying to figure it out. And we were like, the way that I sat, it was like, don't sit like a regular person with both feet on the floor and like in an armchair, because it's rock and roll. We're sitting with our legs up, or we're like laying down. Alan Hunter was sort of notorious for doing all kinds of weird stuff on the set. So we were just trying to figure it out, and we did run that first day. My show was the first show that aired when MTV launched, and we did a lot of running through before we actually put that down. And I just sort of, they had a script for me which I just completely went off. There was nothing about Sue Steinberg in there or any of that stuff. But that was our catchphrase: "You'll never look at music the same way again."
Yeah. In stereo.
So in stereo.
Don't forget the stereo there.
Yeah.
That's great, Mark. Okay. Don't want to take too much of your time. Want to segue
No worries, Jamie. It's all good.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Want to segue a little bit into, today, what's recently happening. You recently devoted a full episode, a very good episode on Debatable on SiriusXM, which is, by the way, a fantastic. If you have SiriusXM volume channel and you're a music nut, like that's the place to go. Like you don't need to go anywhere else. You devoted a long time to Little Richard, who just passed. Yeah. So obviously you had a lot of great guests and you went in really in depth, but without going into that much depth, obviously, what did Little Richard mean to you, and what does his death mean for rock and roll?
In terms of his heyday, I'm a little bit young, but I did get a chance to meet him a couple of times while I was at MTV, and I was like so many people, I was introduced to him by the Beatles covering Little Richard. Beatles doing Long Tall Sally, and hearing other artists do Little Richard. Look, we've obviously lost some pretty major people over these last bunch of years. If we talk about Prince, or you talk about Glenn Frey or Bowie,
Tom Petty.
Oh, just
Yeah.
like through the heart. And Little Richard, in the times that I met him, he was really he was a humble guy, but he had a big personality, and he knew that he was the guy. He was, people were calling him the architect. The spirit of rock and roll was that guy. He was recording and he was putting out songs like 3 years before Elvis Presley even went into the studio. So he was really a founding father to me. He is the guy who, and there's the longtime rivalry between him and Jerry Lee Lewis, who started rock and roll. Little Richard for me he was the guy. And I interviewed him. One of the times that I interviewed him was when Purple Rain premiered. He was at the party. In fact, my co-host on Debatable, Alan Light, sent me a clip from, I hosted the Purple Rain premiere party for MTV, and he was one of the people that I interviewed. And I remember that I was asking him, so what do you think about Prince? And he was like, well, Prince is me in this generation. And we were all like cracking up about it at the time, but he was right.
Yeah.
Prince does not happen without Little Richard. And there's so many other artists that do not happen without Little Richard. And it's kind of the end of an era. We talk often on the show about you have to get out and see these people because they're dying on us. You got to get out there while you can. Yeah. Obviously, we're blocked right now from all of this. But we'll get back to it. Concerts will start to happen again. And these are people who they're leaving us. And because of that, it's important that we remember these guys.
100%, Mark. And I want to elaborate a little bit on that because you mentioned, Glenn Frey, Tom Petty, just one after another. It seems like it's more hurtful every time. On a human level, like, how do you feel when all these people who've meant so much to you, meant so much to me, meant so much to the world, they really are, passing? Like, how does this make you feel? Like, do you think that rock and roll maybe is in danger, in extinction? What are your feelings with all this?
In terms of the icons that we've lost just over the last few years, Prince in particular was one of these. It was a fan thing. I was a major fan and had been with him since his first record and saw him in concert and stuff. But I feel like pieces of history are passing, and that's kind of almost impersonal. But the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing is because music is personal to me, and the reason that and I think everybody, the reason that you resonate with an artist is because there is something. It's a soul to soul connection for me, and it's a spiritual thing. And so when these people go, Tom Petty was out of the blue, and I had seen him a month before. He wrapped up his tour, and I've spent time with him, I've interviewed him. It's personal. It's like somebody who you revered leaving you, and who it's hard to talk about. Petty and Prince in particular were just massive losses for me.
Yes. Yeah. Petty for me personally, I was driving on the highway and I had to pull over. It was just hard. And I think you saw him in the 40th anniversary tour, which I also had the chance to see him. Well, it was the only time I saw him. And I noticed he couldn't really move.
Yeah. I didn't think about that when we saw him. I wasn't really thinking about it. I mean, he's not a guy, he doesn't boogie down on stage,
right?
Or anything. So I wasn't really thinking about it. But then I went back and I looked at some footage and saw, he was having trouble walking.
Yeah. And then everything came out, and you wish he would have just canceled the tour, taken care of himself if his hip needed surgery or whatever. But
yeah.
Man.
Hey, look, the same thing with Prince. His final days, he was in massive pain. He had jumped too many times jumping off that piano in high heels. I mean, he knew what was going on. So he didn't jump around, in those last dates. I'm sure you've seen, the piano and a microphone tour. He was pretty much down on the piano bench in front of the mic, but he, massive pain. We lost these guys the same way, really.
Yeah. No, it really is a shame, but Yeah, I mean, I'm a believer that rock and roll will carry on, even though right now maybe it's not in vogue or whatever with the young generation. But there's something about just seeing the people's effort. I feel like that's like on a human level, just seeing the people's effort, you know, nothing against electronic music. I'm sure the efforts behind the scenes or whatever, but just seeing the John Fogerty go out there and sweat, you know, sweat his face off, something about that just has to come back.
I think it isn't gone, like you say. It's rock and roll has just moved in terms of its influence. It's still very much there, and who knows, man? With this thing, you know, this pandemic being what it is, who knows what music is going to be like after this? I think all the artists that we have spoken to have been really affected by this and have come to realize, you know, it's been a cause for realization for them for a lot of things, gratitude and you know, creation. And we talk with Lucinda Williams, who really has she's been isolated and what it means to her and the music that she comes up with. But you know, rock and roll is just not as influential as it was, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be again. And especially because there's so much great rock and roll music coming out.
Yeah.
There's a ton of it out there. There is a lot of great music being made. You know, right now we're in a phase where pop music is ruling everything, ruling the charts. And when I was growing up, you know, I grew up in the 60s. It was the same thing. It was AM radio. It was pop. You know, we don't have AM radio anymore, but it was the pop hits. So I think that there are more and more artists who are rock artists. And by the way, that includes current country artists as well. People like Butch Walker or Jason Isbell.
Yes.
You know, those guys, they're came out of country, but man, they're playing amazing rock and roll. Butch Walker's record is one of my favorite records of the year. It's amazing. So it's I believe in the power of it. I believe in the artists who make it, that there is a connection that we each make on our own with it. And I think that's important. And so that I don't think will ever be lost.
That's a great place to leave it, Mark. Just one more question and I'll let you go. You know, you in your show, you're always giving the best musical, you know, like Butch Walker, even though he's pretty known now, but you're always giving people gems. I remember last year you gave us Noembe, a German recording artist. You just, I don't think you could pronounce it, but like you just threw it out there.
Yeah.
And upon further research, the guy's amazing, right? So I'm wondering what's on Mark Goodman's Quarantine 2020, you know, most listened to playlist.
Oh man. Well, see, we were just talking about this on our show the other day. This quarantine thing does weird things to people musically and affects people differently. For me, I've been going back. I had to buy a whole new stereo system recently, including a new turntable. And I've been going back to listen to music that I haven't listened to in 30 years and seeing if it holds up. You know, it's sort of like a little exercise on the weekend. So, I mean, I've been going back to old Jackson Browne stuff. I'm from Philadelphia, where in the 70s, prog rock was huge. And okay, I liked some of it. So I've been going back to like old Genesis records and old prog rock bands to see what they're like. So, and trying to do music that is uplifting, that is positive. That the Butch Walker record is top of mind just because it came out last week and I've been playing it nonstop. I just love it so much. Dua Lipa. I love Dua Lipa. Her current album, which she dropped just as this whole thing was going down. Amazing. She's so cool. But I like Angel Olsen just put out some new music. Her record is really good. And I've been listening to that at home. Head in the Heart. I love that. Dropped some new music as well. And tomorrow, coming out on Friday, finally, is the new one from the 1975, who is another band that I really love. And I can't characterize them. I don't know what the hell they do. Every song they do is different. Finally, we're going to get this album, Notes on a Conditional Form, that we've been waiting for. They kept on pushing it back and pushing it back. And finally, we're going to get that tomorrow. Although we got like 5-6 songs from the album already. So those are the things that I've been listening to. I go back really old or brand new.
Perfect, Mark. Yeah. No, I've interviewed a couple, you know, mid-level indie bands like Tennis and so forth, and they've recommended a couple, a really nice artist. I'm sure you know her, Soccer Mommy.
Oh my God, love her.
It's
She's
like
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
Where did this come from? So there's definitely some good stuff out there, Mark. Oh man, I could talk to you for months, weeks, years. Thank you so
We'll
much.
do it again.
Oh man, that was fun. Thank you. And listen, continue to stay safe, continued success. Thank you for thank you for throwing your passion and your knowledge into the airwaves. They're very, very well received by the universe in these times, Mark.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. We'll see you at the Faena Theater.
Crossing fingers, hopefully. Take
All
care,
right.
Mark. Take care.
Take care, Jamie. Good to talk to you. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.